All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jessica Kim, and I am from the University Career Center. And I just wanted to welcome everyone to this event, the International Student Job Internship Search Panel. I just wanted to let everyone know that it will be recorded. And a reminder to keep your questions from the audience general and related to the topic of job internship search. Reserve any specific questions you may have about your visas for after the panel is over during the optional networking time. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for the event, Dr. Jill Huerta. So Jill, please come on up.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you here talking or listening to a conversation on a very important topic and kind of collecting the accumulated wisdom of our experts on our panel. I'm Jill Huerta. I'm Executive Director of the Center for Graduate Life and Learning, and I am fortunate to be joined by these people on my left. We have Douglas Thie, an immigration attorney, Naomi Thamadi, who is an alum from the Data Science and Business Analytics program, now working for Moody's. And then we have Jonathan Allo, who is a current student in mechanical engineering, who has also completed several successful internships as an international student. And I'm going to guess you might even know Amy Mayberry, who does more things than I can list for our international graduate students on campus today. So our panel will go until about 6 or 6:15 at the latest tonight, and then, as Jessica said, we'll leave plenty of time for some networking. I have questions that I can ask our panelists, but we're also interested in hearing what your questions are. So at any time, if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll try to get to everyone. Panelists, would you like to tell us a little more about yourselves before we get started?
Guess I'll start.
Yeah.
So, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here and a privilege to be here this evening. I'm an attorney with Carlson & Stobbs. We're down in South Charlotte off Tyvola. I've been practicing a little over a year now, a little over a decade. If you can't tell from my receding hairline, so a little over 10 years now. I've got two little girls, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and practice a little bit of a couple different areas of immigration law, some employment-based, some family-based as well. So it's a privilege to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Naomi. I'm originally from India, where I worked for a few years for the software industry. I came here for my master's in 2020, and I graduated in May this year, and I'm currently working with Moody's, like Jill mentioned, and it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan, and I am an undergrad student here in mechanical engineering. I will be graduating this semester in about a month. I've had a couple internships in and around South Carolina and North Carolina, and I'm honored to be sitting up here with everyone and to be in this room with everyone else, too.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Mabry from the International Student Scholar Office, the Assistant Director. In our office, as you know, if it's immigration related to someone's F1 or J1 visa status, then our office is involved. But it's fun to me to get to see students outside of the regular advising session. So I'm happy to be here and see you in a different setting tonight.
Thank you, panelists. I'm going to kick us off with a question that I think is really relevant that I'd like to direct to Naomi, our alum, and to Jonathan, our student, which is, and the reason I want to do that is because they are kind of where many of you would like to get to at this point in time. So I think your insight will be particularly helpful. Can you tell us a little bit about what you attribute your success in your internship, in acquiring your internship or full-time position for the first time in the U.S.? What made that a successful endeavor for you? Naomi, do you want to go first?
Yep, Sure. Before working as a full-time employee in Moody's, I did intern for Moody's, and that door opened for me through the recruiting event that was conducted. It was part of the computer informatics program, but I did get a chance to attend it. And for me, I think what made it successful was networking, because you have to make that first impression when you're talking to a recruiter. You've got to make that impression that, yes, you are willing to work for them. You are interested in the company. So, yep, networking. It helped me get the first interview call, and from then on, just make sure that your portfolio is up to date. Think out loud, tell them about your projects, because you want to make sure that you want to let them know that you are interested. You want to let them know that you are skilled, and again, just make sure that you are confident enough when you're talking to them. Yep.
Can you tell us a little about where you found the opportunities to network? Did you do this through events? Did you reach out to people on your own? How did you accomplish this?
Sure. So you have some great resources at the University Career Center. There are sessions being conducted on a regular basis. So I did attend a few sessions. I'm an introvert, so I take some time to interact with people. So those sessions did help me. You can be nervous. I mean, it's okay. We are all humans. We can be nervous. But take your time. You don't have to always do a small talk, but just, I would say, read up on the company that you're working on. In that way, you would have some questions to ask them. You would have some topic to talk to them about. And, yep, that's it. Yeah.
Great, great. Jonathan,
Awesome.
Can you answer as well?
I will say, and kind of piggyback off of what Naomi said, just be open to the opportunities that present themselves to you. Sometimes it's not exactly what you want in your field, and sometimes it's not what you're completely planned for. But being open to those opportunities helps you assess where you are and to plan for the future. To put it more in perspective, if you're say you are supposed to be a software engineer and they offer you an applications, I'm not sure if that's different, but taking one or the other doesn't mean you can't fall into the other role, or you're not open to even being like a project manager, senior type of thing. But you need to get yourself in the door first, and whatever opportunity presents itself, you should definitely take it, especially because we are international students, and you know that door is very, it's not even as wide as that door right there for us. So anything that comes your way, just like be on top of it.
And is this how your own personal journey went? Can you tell us about it?
Yes, of course. As you know, you will get a lot of rejections because of the sponsorship and like all that. Those two questions are the worst questions on every single questionnaire you receive. But this, the success, I wouldn't say, I would say success because it is definitely reflective of where I started and where I am right now. But the big thing is definitely just be open to it. Like, just take what you can and take it legally. So not like a under table type of thing, but if someone presents to you, you know what, I'm willing to offer you like a 20-hour job working as a assistant project engineer underneath me, take it. Not because of the money or anything, but because one, it's a big opportunity for you, and also because the experience you can gather from that can put you in a whole different world that you've never been exposed to. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've interned at electrical companies, civil engineering companies, mechanical engineering companies, and I'm currently working in research. If you asked me 6 months ago if I'd be in research, I would have told you no, because I hate research. I don't like papers, none of that. But I work in research right now, so just be open to anything that comes across your table. And even if it doesn't come to your table, look for that opportunity. There's LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, I hate LinkedIn with a passion, but LinkedIn is one of the best tools you can use out there right now.
I think we're hearing do what you hate. No, just kidding. We're hearing stay flexible.
Stay flexible,
I'm going
yes.
to pick on you two for another minute here while we're talking about your own journeys. and ask you, what were some of the top challenges that you faced? So we just heard a lot about your success, but that didn't come easily, I assume. So what were the challenges?
So I would actually go off what Jonathan mentioned, getting an interview. You go ahead, apply to hundreds of jobs. You would have those clause lines, we might not be open to sponsorship or US citizens only. You would still go ahead and apply, but then you wouldn't get the job. And even on LinkedIn, you go ahead and apply for it, you might or might not get an interview call. So I guess getting an interview, that was the biggest challenge for me, because yes, I did apply, but like I mentioned, my door opened through networking, through the event that was organized by the university. So yeah.
One of the biggest challenges I faced was adjusting to the actual job. So it's great to receive that offer letter and like, oh, your start date is like next week. It personally, for me, it took me, at every job I've done, it takes me about a month and a half to like settle in. And my advice to everyone, because I'm really hopeful and I'm positive that we will all get the jobs that we are applying for, but make sure to give yourself some leeway and some room to settle in. Talk to your supervisors, your employers, and just try to find a strategy for you to kind of like even yourself into the work, because it's a whole different ball game out there. And if you want to do what you're planning to do, you have to be kind of level-headed and be able to do your job well. Not just do it, but do it well, because that's where we're at. We have to do our jobs well to remain in this country. So, yeah.
Any questions from the audience before I go on? I want to give you all a chance. Okay, we'll keep going. I'd like to move on to Doug, if I may, and ask you, as an immigration attorney, how can immigration attorneys help international students?
Yeah, so a great question, and one that I don't think we have quite enough time to answer this evening. But generally the starting point for me having a conversation really is just about education, and there's so many myths, and I'm confident, Amy, you deal with probably even more than I do out there. Immigration's an extremely complex area, and an area where there are a lot of potential options out there, and there are also not a lot of potential options out there. I feel like my job on a daily basis is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And so my goal anytime we speak with international students is really to first educate, and then second, empower, because a lot of times when we're working with international students, they're normally contacting us because they're having an employer that might be a mid-sized, even large employer that might not have a regular standardized sponsorship program like a Bank of America or like a Wells Fargo or a Moody's or a larger employer. And so that's a lot of times our goal when we talk with students is to educate them so that they can then in turn educate the employer that they're potentially going to work for. After a decade of doing this, I find that employers generally have one of two reactions when you ask the exact question that you were just speaking to a moment ago, Jonathan, which is that when you say, yes, I'm an international student, yes, I potentially need sponsorship, you either deal with a great employer that says, oh, great, I've walked through this process before, it's not that bad, there are some pitfalls along the way, but with a trusted partner, we can make this work. Or you get an employer that is like an ostrich, sticks their head in the sand and says, no, this is complicated, I have no idea what we're doing. And so, the other side, I'd say educate, empower, and then the third side would be often, and might sound contrary to the I guess, financial interest of a lawyer, but also sometimes talking students out of ideas. Sometimes students call and say, well, I talked to a person and they talked to this lawyer down in Miami, and the lawyer in Miami says that for X amount of money, you're going to have your green card within 2 weeks. If it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And so, often the third role I feel like I have as an immigration attorney is just talking people out of options and saying, hey, let's rethink this and let's talk about a faster and better route if that's out there. So I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And getting into more of the sort of nuts and bolts of what our students today may want to ask, can you tell us how an international student should answer some of the common questions they encounter on an employment application? For example, are you legally authorized to work in the United States for any employers? And will you now or will you in the future require employment visa sponsorship?
Yeah, so two extremely important questions. And thinking back to the previous question, and probably the fourth thing that we regularly tell international students to do is to go back and speak to your ISO or your DSO at your school. In Amy, I haven't had the privilege of working directly with Amy, but I suspect that with Amy and her other team members, you've got an excellent international team here at Charlotte. And so that's backing up for a second. Often the fourth thing that I tell students is that the team that you're already working with probably knows the law on student visas better than I do. And so go back and talk to them first, because they're a team that really cares about you and is really passionate about seeing you succeed in maintaining the immigration status you need. But backing out, and sorry for the extra commentary on that, but those two questions are extremely important. And the first being, are you legally authorized to work in the United States? If the International Student Office here hasn't already advised you on that, generally the answer, if you've got OPT, so optional practical training, or if you've got CPT, or if you've got a work permit based on an independent status, whether that's temporary protected status, whether that's a pending asylum application, whether that's a pending green card application, that you have a work permit based on one of those, then the answer to that generally is yes. It gets a little more nuanced with will you now or will you in the future require employment visa sponsorship? And sorry for that previous question, that'd be unless you are a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident, or an asylee. Again, answering that question, are you legally authorized to work in the United States? If you're a U.S. citizen, yes, you're legally authorized. If you're a permanent resident, yes, you're legally authorized. But then speaking to those temporary statuses where you would. But going to will you now or will you in the future require employment sponsorship, generally answer yes, unless, again, you've got permanent residence or U.S. citizenship or a temporary status that's independent of a work visa. And so say you complete your master's program, are eligible for F1 OPT, you would still, I think, need to mark yes for that, just because at the end of that 1 year, you are likely going to need sponsorship. So again, the important part of that question being, will you in the future? The second part of that being, again, even if you're here on F1 OPT and eligible for a STEM extension, with that, you are going to, in the future, require sponsorship. So generally advise students to answer yes to that question. My experience working with companies that, and especially larger companies that have a, have that on their intake questionnaire or on that application, and will you in the now or in the future require employment sponsorship? That if you mark no to that because you at that time have F1 OPT or F1 OPT with a STEM extension, if you mark no to that, but then the company comes to find out that you will need sponsorship in the future, that's potentially immediate grounds for termination for having misrepresented a material fact on your employment application, or you're potentially looking at not getting a future interview, a whole host of things. And so long, lawyerly answer, yes to the first question. Are you authorized to work in the United States for any employer? If you do, generally have a work permit. And then no, yes to the second question, will you now or in the future require employment visa sponsorship? So long answer.
And just to clarify, that answer goes for students who are seeking internships who are CPT as well?
Correct.
Correct.
Correct, generally as well for CPT.
Thank you, thank you. Well, you mentioned the excellent support that a lot of international students have at their universities. And you all probably know that we are no different, that the International Student and Scholar Office works very hard to support our international students and help you all launch really successful careers and lives and have a positive experience while you're here. So Amy, can you talk a little bit about what ISSO,
Sure.
as we abbreviate it, does to support students during the job search?
Yeah, so the actual search of finding that job, we're going to refer you to the Career Center because they do a great job. But once you have questions about that specific CPT application, we were available to talk to you during advising to answer those questions, or you can just go ahead and apply. And the application breaks it down about what's required, what that job offer letter should have. There's 2 ways to be authorized for CPT at UNC Charlotte. The first one, it's pretty easy. It's through the Career Center's Experience app. You don't have to have class credit for that CPT experience, and it's a 2-week approval process. The second way we approve CPT is if you need that internship for class credit. And then that's a separate application, and our office reviews both of those. But the application for class credit, your academic advisor has to be involved with as well. And so you apply through our application, through our portal, and the students love our portal. You know, it's pretty clear when there's a question that hasn't been answered or a box empty. You're great at this. But one of the boxes is to request an academic advisor recommendation. So in our portal, you just click the link, you enter your advisor's name, and you don't even have to ask for a recommendation. And it's not even a hard recommendation. It's not a letter that they're writing for you. I mean, I break out into cold sweat writing letters for people sometimes, but they don't have to do this. When they get the email, the auto email, they just click it and they answer some questions, and they're pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. So you will need to put your name and remind them what your student ID number is. But it's a very easy application to apply for CPT. Another thing our office does, but also you could ask for help at the Career Center, is sometimes students, either email or in-person advising, tell us about an offer that seems too good to be true. And sometimes it is. Okay? We've seen students who say, my potential employer is really pushing me to submit my direct deposit form and to get it to them this week. Really pushing for your bank account information, really, okay? And talking about it, sometimes we can pick up some cues that you would pick up too, because you're awesome at this, except whenever you're hyper-focused on a job, you sometimes miss those cues. Like, oh, they want to pay me $45,000 this semester, but I have to sign on it this week. You know, a lot of red flags. And then as you're talking about it, we sometimes pick up and tell you, hey, everything about this sounds like they're fishing for your personal information. Let's just step back and think this through. Sometimes you get an email about an offer that seems too good to be true, and if you just want another set of eyes to review that, we are happy to do that. Okay? And you, everything about it, you would pick up that it's fake. Except whenever you're in that hyper-focused, I've got to get a job mode. Sometimes you're a little too focused to pick up on those cues. So we're happy to help with that.
That makes a lot of sense. When you want something so badly, it can kind of cloud your judgment that you would normally have. Amy, you see students going through this process every day. So can you tell us about some of the challenges that students face regarding OPT and CPT, and do you have any advice to these students to avoid some of those hurdles or challenges?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is just endurance, right? You know this metaphor, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you know that's true about this. So I had a student tell me, I'm discouraged because I've applied for 5 internship jobs and I've gotten denied. And I said, okay, let's up the goal. Come back to me when you've applied for 25, right? And you know this, the number is really high. And in life, we just get discouraged when we work really hard and we have to go a long time before getting some sort of positive reinforcement that we're in the right direction. So what do you have to do to stay encouraged and to keep going? Most of the time, it's people. Your people have to help you. Your friends have to help you. And if your friends are involved in this too, just keep each other encouraged. I mean, like, set a goal. Oh, what number are you on for applying? I'm on 35. Great. Well, when we're at 40, we'll go out to, you can come have dinner at my house. I'll cook. Whatever you have to do to keep yourself encouraged and to keep your friends encouraged. Yeah.
Great advice. Any questions from the audience?
Hi. How early should we apply for OPT before graduating?
This answer is determined by the U.S. government. Whenever you click the submit button to apply online through the U.S. government, if you apply 91 days before graduation, your application will be rejected. So 90 is the magic day. And you can apply even up to 60 days, 59 days after graduation. That makes us really nervous. So we prefer you do it before graduation, but up to 90 days before graduation.
Don't make Amy nervous.
Yeah.
Her job is stressful already. Any other questions from all of you? I'm going to go back to Naomi and Jonathan and ask you, if you were sitting in the seats that these students are sitting in right now in their exact situations, what would you tell yourself? What would have been helpful to know that you didn't know when you were in their chairs?
I would say, considering the number of rejections we get, it is very easy to be disappointed, but don't. And I just want to bring out this one point. Don't want to scare anybody, but yes, we are in a recession right now, but again, most of the companies that would get hit would be the bigger ones, but you still have a lot of other companies which probably don't have a bigger, employee strength, which might still be hiring. So, yep, I think if I was in your situation right now, I would just stay focused, keep yourself motivated. There are a lot of options right there outside, but just keep looking for them. So, yeah, that's the advice I would give.
And prepare for rejection.
Yes,
and
prepare
don't
for
let
rejections.
let it influence
Yep.
you, right? Don't
Yep.
let someone else's rejection of you affect your opinion of yourself or make you discouraged. It's just a matter of needing to go on further.
Yep, and like Amy mentioned, celebrate the small wins. Even if it is, you applied for a job, you get an email, we are considering your application, that is a win. So I would just say, yeah, consider that as a win and say, okay, +1, I got something from somebody instead of like getting completely ghosted out. So yeah, keep celebrating the smaller wins.
Great, thank you.
Two main things. The ISSO is a remarkable resource for you. Go to them if you have any question that you think might not even be a question, to like double check yourself. I talked to Vivian last week about how if I should apply for OPT like one day before or something, she was like, yeah, you need to be on that. So if you have any doubt, talk to them. They are here for us, pretty much, in my understanding. And the other thing is network like crazy. Don't stop talking to people, even though they're not in your major or anything. Go talk to someone who's in psychology. They might know someone who's looking to hire. That's how I got my job. My friend who was in psychology referred me, and that's how I got my job. If you don't know anything, if you don't take anything from today, just make sure you network, because I think that's the currency for today. Knowing people is what gets you to the places that you need to get to and the places that you want to get to.
How many of you find it difficult to get yourself to network? Show of hands. How many of you feel shy? Feel shy about it? So for many of you, you're all professionals, right? What's your advice to them on overcoming that? We all kind of have to overcome that hesitancy about networking, that we just feel kind of shy about. It feels like we're asking people to help us, and it's hard to make a request like that. So who has advice?
Pitch yourself and do it.
Yep.
Just as close to closing your eyes as you can, just do it. It's nerve-wracking, like talking to someone at all, like literally shaking Doug's hand, Naomi's hand, and Amy's right when we got here was crazy. But you know what? It's a means to, you know what, I'm here to do something. I'm gonna go ahead and get it done, and just breach that barrier. It's tough most times, but you just got to do it.
Yep, and like you said, just be out of your comfort zone. If you find it difficult to network, or if that is what you're looking at, try with something else. Maybe take a different route on your way home that you're not comfortable with. Start building your skill or your comfort level to be out of your comfort box, I would say. Start participating in events that you are not good at, but it's something that you can learn from. Again, you get an opportunity to meet a lot of people in such kind of events. You get a chance to just talk to them, and you don't have to say something, like you don't have to make a statement right then and there. Some of your discussions can just be something like we are in right now. You're maybe just getting to know somebody, or maybe just getting to understand the field of work that they are doing, getting to understand their company, and keep that in mind. Maybe it would come in handy for another conversation that you have with somebody. Okay, like, oh, this company was doing something, or this particular person did a project like this, and that was very interesting. You have a point to talk to somebody about, and networking is all about having that set of points that you can discuss with at any point of time. It's not necessarily icebreaker kind of questions, but just a really interesting conversation that you can have with someone.
2 points on networking. One that is for me, the difficulty I had early on in my legal career is that you approach networking like a test. I suspect everyone in here is smart, hardworking, has been successful throughout their lives. And so you can sit down and take a calculus test or whatever else, and forgive me, that was the last math I took a long time ago. But you take a calculus test and you expect to sit down and make a 98 or a 99 on it. But networking is amorphous. There's not a grade at the end. And so I think that's the first thing, is recognizing that reality. And then the second thing about networking is that you've got to figure out what's natural. I've got an associate who works with our immigration team. We network very differently. I love going to networking events. I love going to meet new people. He's a bit more introverted. I think even if he watches this video later, he would acknowledge that he's a bit more introverted. For him, networking looked a lot more like going to soccer matches and playing soccer with friends, which is an inherent place for a large international community, and that came very natural to him. And for me, I quit playing soccer in 8th grade, and so that wasn't a great place for me to network. And so find what's natural for you. Networking is going to look different for every single person, and I know I said 2 points, but to add a third, when you go to networking events, it was a book I read years ago, and the author talked about the reality as humans is, at the end of the day, we want to talk about ourselves. And so if you want someone to find you interesting, ask them questions. You don't have to do the talking. All you have to do is ask questions. And the more that you have conversation with someone, the more that you ask questions, the more you'll know about them, and the easier it'll make conversation. So.
It may feel scary, but you've done something really scary already. You left your country and you studied in the U.S. institution, which is probably a lot different academic system than you're used to. So you can do this. Yeah. And I, the same way, I get nervous about networking. And the thing that I remember when I was in middle school, going to the first day of middle school, thinking, when I grow up, I won't feel so scared and so awkward and out of place. It's not true. I think that sticks with you for all your life, and I just didn't know that. And so just acknowledge that other people feel that way too. So,
some great advice. If I could hop off of my role as moderator for just a minute and presume to answer the question, I would also say for me, a big change in my mindset occurred when I realized networking is not asking people to help me. Networking is meeting people, understanding them, getting a feel for what their goals are, sharing my goals, and then providing mutual help. So when you go out and meet people, whether it's at a soccer game or whether it's at a formal networking event, you keep their needs in the back of your mind. And then you find an article that maybe speaks to something you know they're interested in, and you send it to them. So it's the act of giving as well as receiving. You introduce them to people in your network who might be able to help them. So I think changing your mindset into thinking about it as mutual help could be a useful way to overcome that feeling like I feel shy about asking someone to help me. Really important thing to learn, though. So back to my moderator role. I'm going to go back to you, Doug, and ask you what types of, another specific question, what types of experiences can students with H-4 visa status participate in? Like, can they do an unpaid internship? Can they do volunteer work? What's on the table as possibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be interested to see if Amy has more to add on this in terms of how they advise students. Was actually answered this question for a colleague who works with a large nonprofit in town the Friday before last, and whether it's H-4 or whether it's a F-1 student that doesn't have OPT or CPT or some type of independent employment authorization, there's really two significant concerns to this. One is the immigration side, and the other part is the Department of Labor side. We haven't seen as much focus on the Department of Labor side, but that side just being that it needs to be a true learning experience. It can't be an experience where you are essentially fulfilling an unpaid position that would otherwise be a 40 or 50 or 60-hour week, work week kind of job. And so that's the first component, is just making sure it's actually a learning experience. And I can't speak as much to that just because I practice immigration law, not really labor and employment law. But just to be aware of that. And like Amy said earlier, talking about something that sounds too good to be true. The second component is immigration, and this is a cautionary tale I try and tell students every time that I speak with groups of international students, which is just that what you're doing now is laying the groundwork for hopefully, if it's your desire to remain here in the United States, first F1 student status, then H1B or an O1 or L1 or whatever other status, and then potentially a green card, and then U.S. citizenship down the road. That's what the eventual track looks like. We're seeing more and more requests for evidence or notices of intent to deny from USCIS now, where they question whether an unpaid internship was actually an unpaid internship, or whether this employer that you were working for, were you actually working full-time those dates, as you said you were on your OPT application, or as you said you were on your CPT application. We've seen a renewed emphasis on that probably over the last 12 months. And so, again, being truthful now, acting with integrity, being honest, that's going to set you up for success later, because the last thing we want to see happen is working with a company for a green card application and something that happened 10 years ago comes back to bite you down the road. But the cautionary tale I always tell is one of the first cases I worked on out of law school was a case where immigration was trying to deport someone for having worked without authorization. Immigration takes a really liberal view of what constitutes employment without authorization, and they take the view that anything that looks like work plus anything that looks like compensation constitutes employment without authorization. And so whether you're in an F1 without employment authorization or H4 status, you need to be really careful to make sure that, yes, you can do that unpaid internship, that's a true learning experience, but that you're not receiving compensation under the table, or gift cards or room and board in exchange. That was one of the cases first case I worked on at law school was actually a Buddhist monk that the government was trying to deport because they said that his Dhamma talks on a weekly basis in exchange for room and board was actually employment without authorization, even though he never received a paycheck. So cautionary tale, and just something, again, anything that looks like work in exchange for anything that looks like employment without, or that for anything that looks like compensation, just be be cautious. But I'd love to hear, Amy, I don't know if that's a more conservative or liberal view than your office takes, or?
It's great. So we don't advise with H4s. We would send you to Doug. But for F1 students, if it's an internship and it's just for academic credit, it's not for pay, we still encourage you to get CPT authorization, just because who knows 10 years down the line how it might be interpreted, and we know if you have that CPT authorization, that's the safest possible thing to do. As far as volunteering goes, how we understand volunteering is you're doing a service at a nonprofit, and nobody gets paid for that job. For instance, at the Humane Society, playing with the dogs or cleaning out the kennels, they have lots of volunteers that don't get paid to do that same thing, so that's truly volunteering. Working in a lab is not volunteering, it's unpaid employment. So true volunteering is stuff that nobody would get paid for.
So Amy, you mentioned sending students to someone like Doug. So let me ask you, Doug, if a student were considering hiring an immigration attorney, what should they know before they start that whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is, and the point made earlier and that Amy made as well, which is that if it sounds too good to be true, it often is. The second point is that when you're looking to speak with an immigration attorney, certainly ask around, ask friends. Even though I know it's in the age, we're in the age where it's easier to Google, where it's easier to find something on your phone, trust the online reviews. I find speaking with friends or family members who have potentially worked with an attorney in the past is a great way to find one. The other potential advice is just to make sure up front you're aware of what a fee structure will look like. It's, whether it's hourly billing, whether it's a free consultation, whether it's a flat fee, just ask all those questions up front. And don't hesitate if an attorney says, well, this is my option, or these are not my options. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There have certainly been clients who have come to me and said, hey, I want to talk about this. And I've said, I don't think it's a great idea. They've gone to speak to another attorney. The other attorney has said, well, you know what? Doug's actually missing something. Let's talk about this. And then the attorney is successful, or that client comes back and says, hey, I talked to this other attorney. What do you think? And we say, you know what? We hadn't looked at it from that angle, and we'd be happy to talk more about that. And so look for a second opinion. I think it's easy to settle with the first opinion or the second or the third. We actually had a case about 2 years ago that was approved where a person had spoken with 5 other attorneys before they spoke with us. And we just asked one more question that none of the other attorneys had in the past. And because of that, there were options for the client. So going back to the central message you've heard from all the other panelists tonight, which is don't get discouraged as well. I think if you speak with an immigration attorney and are told, no, there are not any options, A, be grateful that the attorney is likely giving you an honest opinion, but then also B, don't hesitate to ask for a second opinion.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Saw your hand up in the back first. All right, here you go.
I'm just curious about how the Homeland Security keeps track of whether people receive money or not.
So that's a great question. And how is Homeland Security keeping track of whether people receive money or not? So I guess that and this is a couple larger discussions, but one of the really interesting things and one of the fascinating things that people often aren't aware of, including U.S. citizens who have lived here their entire lives or international students who might have only been here a couple weeks, is that there is a surprisingly both limited and vast amount of information that's shared between government agencies. And so, for example, just because you tell something to the IRS doesn't mean immigration actually knows. And so, but if you tell something to the IRS, immigration may know. And so there's unfortunately not a short answer to that question. But it would go back to, I guess, the point earlier, which is you've got to do what will help you sleep at night. And so I always tell international students just to, again, be cautious, get OPT, get CPT, and don't engage in unauthorized employment. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Someone had a question over here. Okay, thank you.
Am I gonna use another or a new social security number for another internship?
So that's a great question. And generally, once you get a social security number, you're going to use that social security number your entire time here in the United States. So once you're assigned that number, you generally won't be applying for a new one. So even new job, new internship, you'll keep that as long as you're.
Thank you. Sorry if my question is a little bit off topic. So let's assume that we apply for a CPT and we get the job, we start working during the summer, and halfway through the employee says, okay, if you have planned, I can apply for a visa for you. Can that happen through the CPT, or should it go to OPT and then H1?
So that is, and it'll be, I think, a changing area within the next year as the needs of employers potentially vary. As Naomi already mentioned, we are in a recession. And so there will be cases where, unfortunately, employers might say, yes, I'd agree to sponsor you, but we're no longer going to. That's one of the really difficult things we see is that we do speak to international students in those situations where they feel like the rug's been pulled out from under them. By and large, North Carolina is an at-will state. And so meaning that the employee can stop working generally at any point in time, but that also the employer can fire the employee at any point in time, and that also comes to visa sponsorship. And so that's one of the frustrating things that we see for international students is that even if an employer says, yes, we're going to sponsor you for an H-1B, yes, we're going to sponsor you for a green card, they can stop that at any point in time, which is frustrating. And going back to the CPT, OPT question, I'll let Amy answer that. My understanding is that if you've had more than 12 months of CPT, you're not eligible for OPT.
So our students play the game really well, and they don't get close to 12 months of CPT. I have heard from a few students who, from an internship, their employer sponsored them for an H-1B. Typically, the trend that we see is that they want more time. It's not a fast process. So they want you to go ahead and get that post-graduation OPT, and then maybe if your application isn't picked the second time, go ahead and apply for that STEM OPT extension just to give them more time to file for your H-1B. Yeah, but yes, there have been a few maybe rock stars that got that H-1B sponsorship from an internship.
And one thing, again, just going back to the education standpoint that we're seeing, and the really tough thing about H-1Bs, which are the most common professional visa, I suspect many of you already know this, but there are only 85,000 H-1Bs per year outside of cap-exempt institutions, and last year there were over 400,000 applications for only 85,000 spots. So odds somewhere in the ballpark of 20%. I'll let the math majors next to me or the people with better math understanding tell you exactly what that percentage looks like. But one of the things that we are seeing is we are seeing more employers that are actually willing to start the green card process from day one with STEM OPT eligible employees, knowing that, and subject to constantly changing processing times, is that knowing that there are some times where you can push the green card process through in 18 months or in 36 months in under 3 years, or with also remote work capabilities today, employers who are saying, even if this process takes longer than 3 years, we're willing to let you work remotely for that last year until you get your immigrant visa, your green card, and come back. So I'll be interesting to see kind of with the shifting job market, how employers change perspective on that. But from an education perspective, if you do a internship with an employer and they absolutely love you, don't hesitate to have that conversation up front and ask them, hey, would you be willing to start the green card process earlier, knowing that lottery, when I started practicing, there were 125,000 applications for 85,000 spots, and that's nearly quadrupled.
What qualifies someone for STEM OPT?
So the U.S. USCIS says that there is a certain list of majors that if you're in that field, and they call that list the STEM list, if you're in that list, you don't only get 12 months of post-graduation OPT, but then you can extend that for 24 months. So altogether, it will be 3 years of OPT. So it is based on this code. It's a 6-digit code, and it's on your I-20. And it's the same code that UNC Charlotte picks, the UNC system picks for your major. So there's no real flexibility. It depends on the major you have and that code. So you can look at your I-20 and then do a Google search for the STEM list and see if your code is in that list. Normally you know ahead of time. If you want to ask our office, we can tell you as well.
Hi, my name is Deborah, senior at UNCC. You mentioned earlier that with STEM OPT, you could have the option of just going directly to a permanent residency card. For anybody that is not in STEM, that just has that 12-month period, would you personally recommend suggesting that to your employer if they're willing to sponsor? Or would you say have them go ahead and start the H-1B process? Because I also, from my understanding, know you have to have the degree completion as of close to 100, or I don't know if you have to graduate to be able to actually have your chance to apply for H-1B, or can you go ahead and start that before? So.
Yeah, so a couple different questions in there. Thank you, Deborah. Talking about an H-1B sponsorship, and those, we normally recommend doing this process side by side, just because the green card process can take longer than 3 years. An employer absolutely could. So someone, and that's the more traditional route we've actually worked with companies, is that normally in times when the lottery odds are a little better, first the F1 OPT student, you've got that for a year, would then apply in the lottery, hopefully be selected. If that student is selected or employee at that point, you can get an H-1B for 3 years. A lot of times employers say, hey, we're going to do the H-1B for the first 3 years, and then at the end of those 3 years, then we'll talk about renewing the H-1B and sponsorship. I think just with the prevalence of international students with master's degrees in STEM fields and bachelor's degrees in STEM fields, we've just seen more employers willing to do that because of the STEM OPT. You've got 3 years for a green card process that's taking about 3 years versus, or 3 years total for regular OPT and STEM OPT. So that's why we, I guess, haven't seen it as much in the context of just regular 1-year OPT, just because the green card process is taking minimum about 3 years through employment-based green cards right now. We're seeing a lot of, and I guess one other message tonight, be patient with immigration, be patient with your international students office, be patient with your immigration attorneys as well. Everything's taking forever right now with the Department of Labor and USCIS. So long answer to your question, but generally, no, we're not seeing employers where someone just has 1 year of regular OPT say that they're willing to move forward with the green card process just because you're looking at minimum 2 to 3 years normally. So.
Hi, again. Would you recommend also looking at, if you're finding it hard to find a job with a company, can someone stay on OPT as a freelancer? And also, another question is, if someone offers you a job and they say, like, we can take you for your year of OPT, but then we cannot sponsor, would you recommend staying away from those offers and just go for companies who do sponsor?
So you can freelance while you're on 12-month OPT. And what matters is that whenever you do all of your reporting in the SEVP portal, you just constantly do any updates so that it makes clear all the days that you're employed. Okay. Do you work your 12-month OPT for a company that can't sponsor your STEM OPT? That's a preference question. Maybe while you're freelancing, you're also keep looking for an employer who's E-verified, who can be a STEM OPT employer. I'm assuming if you're freelancing, it's at will. They know that, you know, you're taking their project on for right now, but if you get a better offer, once this project's done, you're not going to stick with them. So.
So I was just wondering, is there a limit on how many times you can have CPT? I'm an undergraduate student, and I'll be here for like 4 years. So if I have multiple internships, will I be applying for CPT multiple times?
So we have some high achievers who have multiple internships, especially bachelor students. So after you complete that 2 semesters, you know, every summer you could do it. Once you get 365 days of full-time CPT, you forfeit OPT. But our students are so savvy that they don't get close. I've never seen a student forfeit OPT. I had one PhD student who was at 310 days, and I talked to him. I said, "You're getting close." He goes, "Yeah, I'm at 310 days." So I'm like, okay, we're good. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, okay, we got 2 more.
Yeah, are there certain jobs that qualify for an H-1B? Because I know I've had some difficulties. I'm on OPT right now, and then they say like certain jobs don't qualify you for an H-1B. So what jobs should you be staying away from, I guess?
Yeah, so preparing and filing H-1B petitions often feels like fitting a square peg into a round hole, just trying to figure out what occupation matches up. So generally for a H-1B, it needs to be a specialty occupation. A specialty occupation is a job that generally requires a bachelor's or master's degree. Ones to stay away from, I guess, can't necessarily speak to all of those. More I can speak to, you know, generally anything within the STEM field is going to be considered a specialty occupation. What the more difficult ones that we see would be like graphic designers, because sometimes you'll see immigration, USCIS argue that a graphic designer position doesn't necessarily require a 4-year degree. Just general company manager position, USCIS generally doesn't like the word manager at all, because they always say, well, you can manage people, you don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree to do that, even though I would argue to the contrary. And so it's really occupation or really job specific, and that's where I think having that conversation early on with the company while you're in OPT of being transparent, yes, I need sponsorship. You know, the upside from an employer perspective is that if you're sponsoring someone, generally it means that they are only authorized to work with your company, which means that generally they're going to stick around in an era of people constantly job hopping. And so long answer to your short question of would recommend having that conversation early on with the company, so the company or you can reach out to an attorney, educate and ask how do we increase the odds that this position would be found to be a specialty occupation position by USCIS.
Let's assume the student visa F1 or student visa generally expired. Is there gonna be a side effect once the student apply for a job or internship or not?
So your visa doesn't tell you when to go home. So your I-20 more or less tells you when to go home. So if your visa expires while you're in the U.S., it's okay. It makes you nervous, but it's okay. If you go home for a visit, you're going to have to renew that visa before you come back. But it's okay to apply for OPT on an expired visa. Okay to, you know, complete the hiring paperwork with your employer on an expired visa. It's okay to extend your driver's license on an expired visa. We try to educate those departments, especially DMV, and our DMV in North Carolina is pretty good, that they understand what a visa is for an F1 student. Yeah.
So you mentioned like applying for, employers applying for green cards while starting employment. So for a STEM degree for after master's, on average, how long does it take for the green card to come?
So that's a great question. Right now, we're seeing generally the exception to the rule would be like extraordinary ability, or there are a couple exceptions to this rule, but generally the full process. So that process being first the perm period, recruitment, making sure that there are no ready, willing, and able U.S. citizen workers, the I-140 petition, and then the green card. Those are generally the 3 steps of the process. We're seeing that take a full 2 to 3 years right now. So that would be, and right now actually prevailing wage determination, just to give you an idea of processing time. So that's the first part of the process. That was only taking 6 to 8 weeks. It's now up to 11 months for, we have absolutely no idea why, other than slow processing times. So that's why we encourage students to have those conversations at the beginning of the process. But I would say 3 years would be a very conservative estimate, start to finish. And also depending on which country you're from. For some countries there are quotas, there's a backlog, and so the wait could be as long as 10 years to actually, or even longer, to actually get the green card. So 3 years for that initial process, but that wait might sometimes be longer.
Hi, my question surrounds more of initiating the conversation about needing a sponsorship. How early do you think should that conversation start? And this is outside like applying online when you have to tick the boxes and everything. Say you're in like a career fair here on campus and you're having a conversation with a company, you're just having a conversation with companies in general. Would you say that would be a right time to make known that you need sponsorship, or would you say that the conversation should have moved forward, way more past that, if that makes sense?
So I can take that up. I would suggest, number one, when you're at your final stage in your interview, that would be a good time to bring up this question so that even the HR would know that you are requiring sponsorship. Second, once you're in the company, once you get the job, you start working, keep your HR in contact, because in the first few months, there are some legal processes that do happen once you get a full-time job. Again, keep them in loop, let them know, because there are some forms that they would have to fill out. Keep your manager informed so that they would also be aware of the situation. And I would say usually it's around, if I remember, I think it's around March or April that they start to file the H1 applications. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but keep a good buffer. I would say sometime in December, start having that conversation with your manager, informing them or reminding them that, yes, I am an international student, or I am on my F1 OPT, and I would be requiring a sponsorship. So can you get that, can you get the forms in line, or can you inform the HR to start the process? So again.
And just to let you know, the career fairs that the Career Center holds, when you look at the list of employers, you can actually filter for companies that sponsor international students. So you can have that filter, so you already kind of have an idea of which employers openly sponsor international students, and you can like plan your strategize that career fair so you go talk to them first. So that might be helpful too. Any other questions? We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. All right, so this will be the last question over here.
Okay, so I think I watched Saul Goodman too much, but so is there a way to sue employers if they discriminate you, like on the basis of whether you have a sponsorship or green card or not? Like, is there like winning case for it?
That is a great question, far above my pay grade. So my understanding is that there is not, but my understanding, and again, this is a very high level understanding of what the Supreme Court has said, that basically in that situation, that is, and that's the sad to hear these words come out of my mouth, that in that situation you can discriminate. But it's something that you can discriminate based on need for sponsorship, but you cannot in other situations, unless there's a national security interest or something like that, you cannot discriminate based on national origin or race, religion, anything like that. So that's something would be interested to see lawyers pair together, and would love to see it to pair together on that.
One thing that we have seen is employers, for a while, even recently, were putting, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" And they can't put that there, but they can say, do you need sponsorship, and then say no. But you can be not a U.S. citizen, maybe you're an asylee or in temporary protected status, and you have authorization to work. And so that question of limiting pay or positions to only U.S. citizens, apart from it being a national, a security issue, that question could be discriminatory.
And speaking to partially that and partially the previous question as well, and I guess sitting on the other side of the table, we've, with my firm, we're always hiring people. One of my words of advice to, and this is unsolicited, to new employees, is to not be afraid to have those conversations up front. And an example, we've got a team member that I wish that she had let us know that she potentially needed sponsorship. We didn't ask that question because we're a medium employer, just about 100 employees. We could have started the green card process for her a year ago, and I didn't know about it because I didn't handle the onboarding process of completing the I-9, those types of things. So don't be afraid to have those conversations sooner. And employers, at the end of the day, generally care about their employees. Hopefully most of them do. And so the earlier you can have that conversation, the more transparency you can have, the better that also you're able to plan, because then you've got straightforward options and conversations from the start.
Fantastic advice and good words of wisdom to end on. I'd like to thank all of our panelists. Can we give them a hand for coming in? And I would like to invite all of you to network. This is a great opportunity to practice your networking skills and to get a chance to meet people with the kind of expertise you need. So please hang around until 6:30, enjoy some refreshments, and talk with each other and with our panelists and make the most of this event. Thank you for coming, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, Jen.